The market square was alive with noise, laughter, and cruelty. Merchants shouted prices, buyers bargained, and slaves were dragged into the center one by one. Among them was a small alien girl, her body thin, her clothes torn away by rough hands. She stumbled forward, pushed into the open space where the crowd gathered. Her skin was pale, almost glowing under the harsh lights, but it was marked with bruises. Her big eyes were full of fear, and her arms wrapped around herself as if she could hide. But the crowd only laughed louder. Voices rose, mocking her weakness. "She is worthless," one alien sneered, throwing a rotten piece of fruit. "Not even fit for a servant," another spat. Someone in the crowd picked up a broken stick and waved it like a whip, making others cheer. They wanted to see her cry. They wanted to see her fall. The young girl trembled, shivering under the cruel stares, her bare feet scraping against the rough stones. No one came to her side. No one offered help. She was alone, surrounded by laughter and hate. In the middle of the shouting faces, one figure stood still, a human traveler, dressed in worn clothes, carrying only a pack and a long coat. He was not from this settlement, not from this world, but his eyes were sharp and steady. He watched the girl, watched the crowd, and something inside him tightened. The laughter cut into his ears like knives. He clenched his fists, his jaw hard. The cruelty around him reminded him of darker times, memories he thought he had buried. But here it was again, innocence being crushed for amusement. The girl tried to turn away, but the crowd pushed her back. A tall alien yanked at her arm, forcing her to stumble. She cried out, but her voice was too soft to rise above the noise. The laughter grew, the crowd chanting like a game. They stripped her dignity away piece by piece until she could only shake her head and whisper, "No." Her lips quivered, her body curled inward. She wanted to disappear, but there was no place to run. And the crowd wanted more. The human took a step forward but stopped. If he moved, all eyes would be on him. Would he be mocked too, beaten for defending her? He looked around, searching for one more decent soul, but he found none. Every face was twisted with amusement or hunger. He felt disgust rise inside him, stronger than fear. And then he looked at her again. The small figure, alone, trembling, trying to hold herself together, her eyes lifted just once, meeting his. And in that single glance he saw her silent plea, "Help me." The crowd did not notice the human yet. They were too busy laughing, shouting, throwing scraps of garbage. The girl fell to her knees, her shoulders shaking. A stone struck her leg, and she gasped, curling tighter, but no one stopped. They only cheered louder. It was entertainment for them, nothing more, a cruel game with no end. The human felt heat rising in his chest, anger boiling. He could not stand still anymore. Slowly, he shrugged off his pack. His hands reached for his coat, worn but strong. The crowd was still laughing, unaware of what he was about to do. The girl sobbed quietly, her voice barely heard. He gripped the coat tightly, taking a deep breath. One more step, and then another, pushing through the wall of bodies. Gasps began to rise as people noticed him moving forward. Who was this stranger, this human, stepping into their cruel fun? He ignored their stares, ignored their shouts. His eyes stayed on the girl and only her. When he reached her side, he knelt down. The girl looked up, confused, trembling harder. He said nothing at first, only wrapped the coat around her shoulders. The crowd fell silent, their laughter cut short. The girl's eyes widened, her hands clutched at the warm fabric. For the first time that day, she was covered, not mocked, not stripped, but protected. Whispers spread through the crowd, disbelief and anger mixing with surprise. Why would a human defend such a worthless creature? The human stood tall, shielding her with his body. His voice was low but firm. "Enough," he said, and the word carried more weight than the crowd expected. The girl pressed against his side, shivering, but for the first time her trembling slowed. The cruel game had ended, but something new had begun. The crowd was not finished yet, and he knew it, but he had made his choice, and nothing would turn him back. The marketplace was no longer laughing. The moment the human wrapped his coat around the alien girl, silence cut through the noise. The crowd stared, their mouths open, as if they had just witnessed something. Impossible in their eyes, the girl was trash, not worth saving, not worth a coat. And yet here was a stranger, a human of all beings, standing tall beside her. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, steady and protective. The girl trembled under the coat, her big eyes staring at him with confusion. She had never known kindness, and now she didn't understand why it came from him. The first voice broke the silence with a mocking laugh. "What is this? A human playing hero?" One alien sneered, another jeered. He must have lost his mind giving his coat to that filth. The crowd roared again, not with joy but with anger. They had wanted entertainment, but the human ruined their game. The laughter turned into shouting, the stares turned into glares. People shoved closer, spitting words filled with hate. "Leave her, human," one barked. "She's not worth the trouble." But he did not move, his face calm, though his fists were clenched tight. The girl tugged on his coat, whispering weakly, "They will hurt you." Her voice cracked with fear. "Please let me go, I am nothing. You do not need to do this." Her words cut deep, but he shook his head slowly. He knelt again so his eyes were level with hers. "You are not nothing," he said quietly, but firm enough that she could feel his conviction. "You are someone, and no one deserves what they did to you." The girl's lips trembled. She wanted to believe him, but her whole life told her not to. The crowd began to close in, circling them. One alien spat near his boots, another raised a hand as if to strike. The human's eyes sharpened, his body tense. He spoke loudly this time, his voice carrying through the mob. "I said enough." The words rang like steel. Some of the crowd faltered, but others snarled. They were not ready to lose their cruel fun so easily. A tall alien with jagged scars stepped forward, his voice booming. "Human, you think you can shame us? That coat does not change what she is." He pointed at the trembling girl. "She is trash and you will join her." The girl whimpered, clutching the coat tighter, hiding her face in the fabric. The human stepped in front of her, shielding her small frame with his body. He felt the eyes of the crowd burning into him, hatred pressing down like a heavy storm, but deep inside he knew his choice was already made. He could walk away, let them continue, and no one would remember his name. Or he could stand here, against all of them, for one trembling soul who had no one else. His heart told him there was no question. He chose the harder path, the dangerous path, but the right one. The scarred alien lunged forward, his arm swinging like a whip. The human caught his wrist mid-air, twisting sharply. The alien cried out, falling to his knees. Gasps erupted from the crowd. No one expected a human to fight back. The human released the alien and shoved him aside, standing tall again. His voice echoed through the tense silence. "Touch her again, and you answer to me." The girl's breath caught, tears forming. In her eyes, she had never seen anyone fight for her, never seen anyone risk themselves for her. The crowd hesitated, their anger clashing with uncertainty. Some whispered that this human was dangerous, others said he was foolish and would die, but none dared step closer for the moment. The girl looked at him again, her heart racing. "Why?" she whispered, barely able to breathe the word. He glanced down, his expression softening. "Because I could not watch anymore," he said. "Because you deserve to live, not to be broken for their amusement." Her hands shook, but she held his coat tighter, as if afraid it would vanish. The marketplace was no longer just a stage for cruelty. It had become a battlefield of choices. One human had stood where no one else would. The crowd waited, the tension like fire in the air. Would more step forward against him, or would fear keep them still? The human's choice had been made, and he would not turn back. He did not know what would happen next, but he knew one truth. The alien girl was no longer alone, and for the first time in her life, she was not left to the mercy of the cruel crowd. The silence in the marketplace did not last. Whispers rippled through the crowd like fire racing across dry grass. They had expected the human to break, to bow down, to walk away in shame. Instead, he stood tall with the alien girl clinging to His coat. That one act was enough to change the mood. The laughter was gone, but in its place came anger, sharper and heavier than before. The scarred alien he had thrown aside crawled to his feet, groaning. He wiped his mouth and spat blood, his eyes burning with rage. "You dare raise your hand against me, human?" he roared. The crowd shouted in support, voices overlapping. "Punish him," someone yelled. "Teach him a lesson," another cried. The noise swelled, rising like a storm. Dozens of eyes glared at the human as if he had committed a crime by showing kindness. The girl trembled behind him, pressing her face into the coat. Her small hands clutched the fabric like it was her last shield. She whispered softly, almost too quiet to hear, "They will kill you, please. You should not have done this." Her words cracked with fear and guilt. She could not understand why he risked himself for her. She believed her life had no value. But his life was worth something. Yet here he was, ready to throw it away for her. The human's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm. "I will not let them harm you again," he said. The girl's eyes widened, tears running down her cheeks. She had heard many promises in her life, but never one spoken with such weight. The crowd, however, did not see bravery. They saw defiance, and defiance had to be crushed. A group of 3 aliens stepped forward, larger and stronger than the rest. One carried a heavy chain, the other a jagged club. The third only cracked his knuckles. They sneered at the human, circling him like predators around prey. "Put down the coat and walk away," one of them said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no place here, human, no power, no protection, and no allies." The crowd cheered in agreement, mocking laughter filling the air once more. They wanted to see the human broken, humiliated, lying in the dirt beside the girl he dared. To save, the human did not move. His eyes flicked from one attacker to the next. Calm but unyielding, he could feel the weight of their hate, but he stood firm. Behind him, the girl whispered, "Run, please, just leave me. They will hurt you more." But he shook his head slightly, never looking away from the men before him. "I told you," he said softly, almost like a warning. "Touch her again, and you answer to me." The first alien lunged with the chain, swinging it through the air. The human dodged to the side, grabbing the chain with both hands. With a sharp pull, he yanked the alien forward and slammed him into the ground. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in shock. The second swung his club, but the human ducked low, his fist driving hard into the alien's ribs. The club bearer staggered, wheezing in pain. The third tried to grab the girl, but the human blocked him, his shoulders striking hard. The alien fell back with a grunt, the coat still safe around her small frame. For a moment, the square froze. The human breathed hard, his body tense, his fists still ready. 3 attackers lay groaning on the ground, defeated. The crowd had thought him weak, but now their mocking faces shifted into something else, fear mixed with fury. No one had expected him to stand against them, let alone win. Whispers turned into shouts. "He thinks he is a warrior," someone spat. "He shames us all," another growled. The laughter returned, crueler than before. Not because the girl was weak, but because the human dared to stand strong. They laughed to hide their unease. They laughed to cover their anger. Their mocking voices rose higher, louder, until the square trembled with noise. The girl clutched at his sleeve, her tears hot against her cheeks. "Why do they hate you now, too?" she asked in a broken voice. He glanced down at her, his eyes steady even as the mob screamed. "Because I refuse to hate you," he answered. She blinked at him, stunned, her lips parting as if she could not understand the meaning of his words, but something in her chest ached, something new and fragile. No one had ever chosen her before. No one had ever stood with her when the world mocked. The mocking crowd grew restless. Some threw more scraps of trash, others picked up stones. They would not stop until he was forced down. The human knew this, but he tightened his stance, pulling the girl closer to his side. He would take every insult, every strike, but he would not step back. The mockery had turned, but so had his resolve. If the whole world laughed at him for protecting one broken soul, then let them laugh. for he had already made his choice. The air in the marketplace was heavy with anger. The crowd had mocked, jeered, and now many were ready to strike. The human stood firm, but he knew the odds were against him. He could not fight them all, not with the girl trembling behind him. The girl clung to his coat like a lifeline, her voice weak and broken. "They will never stop," she whispered. "They will hunt us until you are gone." Her words carried truth, and the human understood it. If they stayed here surrounded, the crowd would crush them. He had only one choice now: escape. He leaned down to her, his voice calm but urgent. "Stay close to me. Do not let go," he said. Her wide eyes looked at him in fear, but she nodded. Her small fingers tightened around the coat as if she feared it would vanish. The crowd surged forward, voices rising like thunder. The human shoved through a gap, pulling the girl. With him, shouts filled the air. "Stop them! Catch the human! Bring her back!" Stones and scraps flew, some striking his back. But he didn't slow. He pushed harder, weaving through the maze of bodies and stalls. The marketplace spilled into a narrow street. Shadows stretched long between the tall buildings. The human ran, his boots pounding against the stones. The girl stumbled beside him, her bare feet scraping and bleeding. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms. She gasped softly, surprised by his strength. But she clung to him, hiding her face against his chest. Behind them, angry footsteps echoed, the mob chasing. Their shouts grew louder, bouncing off the stone walls. The human turned corner after corner, his heart racing. He knew these streets were not his. He was a stranger here, but instinct guided him, always searching for darker paths. He ducked under broken arches, slipped through half-collapsed alleys, yet still the crowd followed, their fury unshaken. The girl trembled in his arms, whispering, "Why do you not leave me? They only want me." Her words cut deep, but his voice was steady. "You are under my protection now," he said. "I will not hand you back to them." A stone struck the wall beside him. Another whizzed. Past his head, the mob was closing in. Their steps faster, their cries sharper. The human's breath grew heavy, his muscles burned. But he pushed forward, each step a promise not to let her go. He spotted a broken archway leading into the ruins of an old structure. Without thinking, he darted inside, the girl clutching tighter. The mob thundered past the street, some stopping to search. But for the moment, the two of them were hidden. In the shadows inside the ruins, the air was damp and cold. Rubble covered the floor, and broken beams leaned like jagged teeth. The human crouched low, keeping the girl close. She shivered, both from fear and the chill of the night air. He set her down gently, wrapping the coat tighter around her. Her small frame shook, her eyes wide with tears. "You should not risk this," she whispered again. "No one has ever fought for me, no one has ever cared. Why do you?" The human met her gaze, his eyes calm even in the darkness. "Because no one else will," he answered simply. She blinked, stunned by the words, her heart twisted with emotions she had never felt before. She wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at her. The mob's shouts still echoed outside, distant but near enough to remind her that danger was close. Every sound made her flinch, every shadow made her tremble. The human leaned against a cracked wall, his body tense. He knew this was only the first escape, not the last. They would not give up, not after being shamed. But for now, they had a brief moment of safety. The girl looked at him again, her voice breaking. "If they catch you, they will kill you. Worse than they would me." His lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes sharp. "Then we will make sure they do not catch us," he replied. She swallowed hard, her small fingers gripping the coat again. For the first time, a flicker of hope stirred inside her fear. She had been mocked, beaten, left for nothing, but this human carried her, shielded her, fought for her. She did not understand why, but she felt it. He would not abandon her. Outside, torches lit the night, voices calling, feet stomping. The mob spread out, searching every corner of the district. The human listened, his ears sharp, his mind racing with plans. They could not stay here long. The hunters would find them, but he also knew the girl was weak, starving, and injured. If he pushed her too far, she would collapse. He clenched his fists, torn between choices. Run now and risk her strength, or wait and risk discovery. Either path was dangerous, but he was determined to see her survive. The girl shifted closer, leaning against him. Her small voice whispered, "I do not want to. Go back." The human looked down, meeting her eyes. "Then you won't," he promised. The words were simple, but to her, they were everything. For the first time in her life, someone had said she would not be abandoned. And in that ruined shelter hunted by the crowd, a fragile bond was born. The ruins gave them a brief shield, but the human knew they could not stay there. The mob would search every broken wall and every dark alley until they were found. The girl was too weak to run further, her legs trembling, her breath shallow. So the human carried her again, moving quietly through back streets. He kept to the shadows, every step careful, every sound making him tense. The girl rested her head against his shoulder, her voice soft as wind. "Why do you keep holding me? I will only slow you down." He glanced at her, his jaw tight. "You are not a burden," he said. "You are the reason I keep moving." After long minutes of weaving through the city's veins, he found a place. It was an old outpost, abandoned years ago, its roof half collapsed. The walls leaned, but they still offered cover. Broken windows let the pale moonlight spill across. The floor, inside. It was quiet, the smell of dust and rust heavy in the air. The human lowered her carefully onto a pile of rags left behind by scavengers. She sank into them, her body trembling from exhaustion. Her large eyes looked up at him, filled with confusion and fear. No one had ever placed her somewhere safe before. The human set down his pack and searched inside. He pulled out a small bundle of food, dried bread, some fruit, a flask of water. He broke the bread into small pieces and held it out. The girl hesitated, staring at it like it was a trick. Her lips quivered, her hands refusing to move. "Is it really for me?" she whispered. "You would give your food to me?" The human nodded once, his voice calm. "Yes, eat. You need it more than I do." Finally, with shaking hands, she took the piece. She nibbled slowly, her throat working hard as she swallowed. Tears welled in her eyes, running down her bruised cheeks. She had eaten scraps from the ground before, stolen when no one was watching, but never had someone offered her food with their own hand. The taste was simple, but to her it was like a feast. She drank from the flask, coughing at first before drinking more. The human watched quietly, his eyes soft, but his posture still, tense. He could hear distant voices in the city. The hunt still not finished. But for this moment he let the girl eat in peace. When she was done, she curled beneath his coat again. The fabric wrapped around her small body, warming her against the night's chill. Her voice came out fragile, broken but curious. "Why do you not leave me? They hate me. They call me nothing, and still you fight for me." The human sat beside her, leaning back against the cracked wall. His eyes were shadowed, as if looking into memories he rarely spoke of. "I know what it feels like to be left behind," he said slowly. "To be treated as less. To have no one." The girl's breath caught, her eyes searching his face. "You too," she whispered, disbelief in her tone. He gave a small nod. "Yes, me too." The fire between them was small, just a glow from the corner where he lit scraps of wood. The warmth touched her face, making her eyes glisten. For the first time in years, she felt something strange. It wasn't just safety, it was belonging. Her heart trembled as she whispered, "Then, you are different from them." The human didn't answer at first, but the corner of his mouth curved slightly. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just chose not to be like them." Outside, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly. The mob was searching nearby, their torches glowing against the night. The girl flinched, her hands clutching his coat tighter. "They are coming," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. The human placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Do not fear. "They will not take you," he said firmly. She looked into his eyes and felt the weight of his words. He was not lying. He meant every promise he spoke. Minutes passed, heavy and slow, until the torches faded further away. The girl relaxed a little, leaning against him, her eyes half closing. The exhaustion pulled at her, but she fought sleep. She feared if she closed her eyes, he would vanish. Sensing her struggle, the human pulled the coat tighter around her and whispered, "Rest, I will keep watch." Her lips parted as if to speak, but instead she sighed. Her small body curled against his side, drifting into the first peaceful sleep she had known in years. The human sat awake, his eyes on the shadows outside. Every sound made his muscles tense, his fists ready. He knew this shelter was only temporary. The crowd, the hunters, they would not forget what he had done. But for now, in the broken walls of this outpost, he had given her something no one else ever had. A night without cruelty, a night without mockery, a night with warmth. And as he looked down at the sleeping girl beneath his coat, he swore silently that he would protect her no matter the cost. The night grew colder, but the fire inside the ruined outpost still glowed faintly. The girl slept under the human's coat, her small breaths soft and uneven. For the first time, she felt safe, but safety never lasted long in this place. The human sat awake, his eyes sharp, his hand resting near the knife at his belt. He could hear faint sounds beyond the broken walls, whispers carried by the wind. The crowd had scattered, but the hunt was not over. He knew they would not forgive what he had done. They had been humiliated, and humiliation demanded revenge. The girl stirred in her sleep, a whimper escaping her lips. Her hands clutched the coat tighter, her body trembling even in dreams. The human leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "You are safe," he whispered, though he knew danger was already moving closer. He listened again, and this time he heard it clearer. Heavy boots, slow steps, the scrape of metal. Not the wild noise of a mob, but the measured pace of trained hunters. They were coming, and they were coming for her. The girl woke with a gasp, her eyes wide with fear. She looked at him, and before she could speak, he nodded. "They are here," he said, calm but urgent. Her heart raced, her hands trembling. "They will take me back," she whispered. "No," the human said firmly, his voice leaving no space for doubt. "They will not take you, not while I stand." The first shadow appeared at the broken window, a tall figure with armor glinting under the torchlight. Behind him came two more, each armed with blades and chains. Their eyes burned with hatred, their voices sharp. "There he is, the foolish human," one growled. "And the little rat he thinks he can protect," another sneered. The girl pressed closer to the human, her body shaking violently. "They will kill you," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. The human placed his hand on hers, gripping firmly. "Then I will fight until my last breath," he said. The hunters stepped inside, their boots crunching against rubble. The human rose slowly, his coat falling from his shoulders. The girl caught it, clutching it around herself. He stood tall, his shadow long against the cracked wall. The lead hunter raised his chain, grinning cruelly. "You think you can defy us, human, but tonight, we end this." The human's eyes narrowed, his fists clenched. "Come then," he said, his voice like stone. The first hunter charged, swinging the chain. The human ducked low, grabbing a broken beam from the floor. The chain struck the wall, sparks flying. With a sharp twist, the human shoved the beam forward, striking the hunter's chest. The man staggered, coughing, but the second attacker rushed in, blade gleaming. The girl screamed, covering her face. The blade swung down, but the human blocked with the beam, the clash ringing through the ruins. He pushed hard, sending the attacker stumbling back. The third hunter tried to circle toward the girl. Her eyes widened, fear freezing her body. The human saw and moved fast, throwing the beam like a spear. It struck the hunter's leg, sending him crashing to the floor. The girl gasped, her heart racing. She had never seen anyone fight for her like this. She had never seen someone bleed for her either. For the human's arm was cut, blood dripping down. Yet he did not slow. The hunters regrouped, their anger rising. "This human bleeds like all others," one hissed. "He cannot last," another sneered. But the human stood tall, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with fire. He wiped the blood from his arm and spoke through gritted teeth. "I will not give her to you, not now, not ever." The girl's tears fell faster, her voice trembling as she cried out, "Why do you fight for me? Why do you suffer for me? I am nothing." The human looked back at her, his face softening for only a moment. "You are not nothing," he said. "You are worth fighting for." The hunters roared in rage and attacked together. Chains, blades, and fists flew in the dark. Ruin, the human blocked, struck, and endured, each movement fueled by resolve. The girl pressed her hands to her mouth, praying silently, though she had never prayed before. The clash echoed in the night, metal against wood, cries against silence. The human was outnumbered, bloodied, but unbroken. He fought not for himself, but for the small soul watching him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Finally, with one last desperate strike, he slammed the broken beam across the leader's face. The man fell, groaning, his chain clattering to the ground. The other two backed away, panting, glaring at him with hate but also fear. They had not expected the human to last this long. They spat curses and retreated into the night, their voices promising they would return. The human staggered, leaning against the wall, blood dripping from his arm and side. The girl ran to him, her hands trembling as she held his sleeve. "You are hurt," she whispered, tears streaming. He forced a weak smile, his hand resting on her head. "But you are safe," he said. Her chest ached, her heart pounding. For the first time she realized, someone had chosen her life above their own. The ruins were silent after the hunters fled. The only sound was the human's heavy breathing and the girl's soft sobs. Moonlight spilled through the broken roof, shining on his wounded arm and side. Blood stained his clothes. But he still stood tall, refusing to fall. The girl clutched his coat around herself, trembling as she looked at him. She could not believe what she had seen. He had fought 3 hunters, bled for her, and yet he did not step away. Her lips quivered as she whispered, Why would you do this for me?" The human turned his gaze to her, tired but steady. "Because you deserve more than chains and cruelty," he said. "No one deserves to be treated the way they treated you." His words struck her heart, making it ache in ways she had never felt. Tears fell freely down her cheeks, but these were not only tears of fear, they were tears of something new, hope, fragile but real. She moved closer, her small hands shaking as they touched his arm. "You are hurt," she whispered, "because of me." He shook his head slowly, his voice calm though his body trembled. "I am hurt because I stood, because I chose, not because of you." She pressed her forehead against his arm, clutching, the coat tighter around her body. "I was nothing. Everyone said I was nothing but you. You say I am worth something." The human rested his hand on her head, gentle despite the pain. "You are not nothing," he repeated firmly. "You are someone. And from this moment, you are not alone." The girl's chest shook with silent cries. She had dreamed of kindness but never believed it could be real. Now it was here in the form of a stranger who had become her protector. She whispered through her tears, "Then let me stay. Let me belong to you." Her words were not chains, not forced, but a plea for safety, a plea for family. The human looked at her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded once, his voice low but sure. "You belong where you are wanted, and you are wanted with me." The fire between them had burned low, but it cast enough glow to warm the shadows. The girl curled against his side, resting her head against his chest, her small body fit beneath, his arm as if she had always been meant to be there. She listened to his heartbeat, strong and steady despite his wounds. For the first time in her life, she felt safe enough to close her eyes without fear. The human leaned back against the broken wall, his own eyes heavy, but his grip on her never loosened, as if he had sworn to the night itself that she would never be left unprotected. Outside, the city still stirred with whispers of what had happened, A human had stood against a crowd, had defied hunters, had protected a girl everyone else had cast aside. The story would spread, twisted in many ways, some calling him a fool, others calling him dangerous. But inside the ruined shelter, none of that mattered. What mattered was the bond forged between one broken girl and one stubborn human. The girl stirred again, half asleep, her voice weak, but filled with something new. I thought I would die in shame alone, but now I feel alive. The human looked down at her, his tired face softening. You will live, he said, and you will live free. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. Her tears drying, she whispered, because of you. And for the first time, she believed her words. The night stretched on, but the fear in her heart began to fade. She had been stripped, mocked, treated as worthless. Yet one human had wrapped her in his coat, had fought for her, had chosen her. That choice changed everything. It was more than rescue. It was the birth of trust. More than kindness. It was the start of belonging. When dawn's light crept into the ruins, the girl opened her eyes slowly. The human was still awake, watching the door, his arm still around her. She whispered, You did not sleep. He gave a faint smile, shaking his head. Someone had to keep watch, he said. Her chest warmed, her small fingers tightening around his sleeve. She had no words, but her heart spoke clearly. She was his now, and he was hers. The world outside was still cruel, still dangerous, still waiting for them. But inside the ruined outpost, hope had been born. The human had given his coat, his strength, and his blood to protect her, and in return, the alien girl had given him something he had not expected, a bond unbroken by fear, a bond stronger than mockery, a bond that promised they would face whatever came next. Together,